I stepped in through the side entrance and heard my mom say I was the family's ATM. So, I closed the account for good. I wasn't supposed to come in through the side door that day. Usually, I'd use the front, but it was completely blocked by a mountain of rusty folding chairs from some cookout weeks ago. Nobody had bothered to move them, which honestly was classic. I didn't feel like wrestling with them, so I just walked around to the side. That door had always creaked since I was a kid, and the little hallway behind it always smelled like potting soil and old paint cans. Some things in that house, I guess, never changed. The rest of the house was loud when I stepped inside. Someone had the blender going in the kitchen, and I could hear laughter bouncing off the walls. My mom's laugh was easy to pick out because she does this thing where she snorts a little at the end when she finds something genuinely funny. Then another voice, deeper, slower, my Uncle Dean. I wasn't trying to sneak in, just hadn't gotten a chance to say hi yet. I was still standing in the mudroom, keys in one hand, shoes half kicked off, when I heard him say it. He's just here to feel important. There was a tiny pause. The kind of pause where someone decides whether to agree or push back. Then my mom chose. Yeah, poor thing. Thinks money makes him family. I stopped breathing for a second. Not out of shock, not exactly. More like the air just left me on its own, like my lungs heard it before my brain finished processing. Then I walked in. My mom turned first. She went absolutely pale, like she'd been caught stealing from the church collection played on a Sunday. Uncle Dean just stared at the floor, suddenly fascinated by the crumbs on the tile like they were the most interesting thing he'd seen all week. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just looked my mom dead in the eye and said, "You're right." Then I added, "Which is why this family won't see another dollar from me ever." And I left. Before anyone could respond. I wasn't going to stick around and make it easy for them to recover. I wasn't going to give them the chance to rephrase it, or explain it away, or hit me with some version of "you took it out of context." I heard what I heard. By the way, I'm Garrett, 31 years old. I'm a regional account supervisor for a commercial equipment company out of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing glamorous. I manage client relationships across the Midwest, oversee service contracts, make sure our field teams aren't messing up installations. I started at the bottom of that company 8 years ago, answering phones for $12 an hour. I worked my way up by being the guy who never called in sick, never missed a deadline, and never made a client feel like their problem wasn't important. Now I pull in around $92,000 a year before bonuses. During a good quarter, I clear 6 figures. I'm not rich, I want to be clear about that. But for a single guy with no kids, a paid-off truck, and a modest apartment, I've done all right. Better than all right, honestly. I'm the only one in my immediate family who has. And that right there? That's where all the problems started. My family has never been wealthy. My dad drove delivery trucks most of his life. Honest work, decent pay, but never enough to get ahead. My mom worked reception at a dentist's office until she got laid off 5 years ago and never really found anything steady after that. She picks up odd jobs here and there, watches a neighbor's kids, but nothing consistent. My sister Paige works part-time at a veterinary clinic, and my brother Jared is a mechanic across town. Nobody in my family is lazy, but nobody ever really broke through either. Except me. And somehow, instead of that being a point of pride for them, it became this quiet source of resentment. Something none of them ever acknowledged out loud, at least not to my face. Growing up, I was always the responsible one, not by choice, just by default. When something needed to get done, I was the one who did it. Paige was the baby of the family, coddled accordingly. Jared was the middle child who kept to himself. And I was the oldest, which in my household meant being treated less like a firstborn and more like an unpaid intern for my parents' life. I didn't resent it back then. I actually thought it meant they trusted me more than the others. Thought it meant they saw something in me that they didn't see in Paige or Jared. Turns out, they just got comfortable using me. And comfort has a way of turning into expectation real fast. By the time I was old enough to realize what was happening, the pattern was already set in stone. I was the one who handled things. That was my role. And nobody ever asked if I wanted it. What made that side door moment hit so hard wasn't just the words themselves. It was everything behind them. I'd spent the last 6 months bending over backwards for these people, quietly, without any fanfare, without keeping score, without ever once throwing it in anyone's face. My sister Paige had racked up $4,000 in credit card debt after her boyfriend ghosted her. She called me one night in tears, saying she couldn't make the minimum payments anymore and her credit score was about to crater. I paid it off. The whole balance. Didn't tell a soul. Didn't even bring it up to her again after it was done. 2 months before the side door incident, my parents' heating system died right as October hit. The estimate came back at $12,200. My mom called me sobbing, saying they didn't have it and didn't know what to do. I sent the money that same afternoon. Wire transfer. Done. She called me back crying even harder and said I was a godsend. Her exact words. God sent you to us, Garrett. 60 days later, I was the guy who thinks money makes him family. And it wasn't just the big emergencies, either. Every single time I visited, I was paying for something. Groceries when the fridge looked sad and empty. A new set of tires for my dad's truck because the old ones were bald and he was driving on prayers at that point. The cable bill that somehow always ended up being confusing right around the time I showed up. Christmas gifts for the extended family because nobody else ever planned ahead. Even the food they served at holiday dinners, I'd paid for half of it. I was the silent engine keeping everything running in that family, and they'd somehow twisted all of it into something ugly. It wasn't even the first time they'd said something sideways about me. My mom once told my aunt on the phone that I liked to remind people what I did for them, which was a flat-out lie. I never brought up money unless someone directly asked. Uncle Dean had cracked jokes at Thanksgiving about me being the family sponsor, and everyone at the table laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I let it all slide because I convinced myself they were just being playful. But the side door moment was different. That wasn't a joke at a dinner table. That was a private conversation between two people who genuinely believed what they were saying. And there's a massive difference between someone roasting you to your face and someone trashing you behind a closed door when they think you'll never find out. The strange part is, I didn't even feel angry right away, just empty. Like something that had been holding me upright for years had finally buckled. I didn't go home that night. I drove to a Holiday Inn near the mall. Just a standard room with stiff sheets and a TV I left on mute. I lay there staring at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time I'd visited my parents without paying for something. I couldn't. Not once. Every single visit had come with a price tag, and I'd been swiping my card like it was the cost of admission to my own family. The next morning, I turned off my phone. The day after that, I turned it back on. 32 messages. Most of them from my mom, ranging from, "I'm so sorry you heard that," to, "You're blowing this out of proportion." A few from Uncle Dean, including one that was just a thumbs-up emoji with no other context, which was so tone-deaf it almost made me laugh. One from Paige that just said, "Call me." And one from my brother Jared. Jared never says much, but when he does, it carries weight. His message said, "I know they were out of line, but you disappearing won't fix it either." He was trying, but he didn't get it. I wasn't disappearing. I was changing. There's a difference. Disappearing means running from the problem. Changing means deciding you're done being the solution to problems that were never yours in the first place. Looking back, I realize how powerful that moment was. Most guys would have blown up, started yelling, sent a 10-paragraph text at 2 in the morning, given the family exactly the reaction they needed to flip it around and make him the bad guy. But I didn't give them that satisfaction. I just left them with that one clear sentence. That's elite-level emotional control, honestly, because here's what most people don't understand. You can argue with anger. You can't argue with absence. Silence from someone who used to always show up? That's terrifying. And that's exactly the weapon I'd just pulled out. I'd gotten used to the idea that love had to be earned in my family. That maybe if I just gave enough, supported enough, solved enough of their problems, they'd eventually see me differently. But all my giving did was make them comfortable, entitled. They stopped seeing the help and started expecting it. And when you expect something, you stop being grateful for it. Worse than that, you start resenting the person who provides it because deep down you know you need them. And nobody likes feeling dependent on someone they secretly look down on. So I stopped. Cold. I stopped answering money requests. I didn't show up to Paige's birthday dinner that month, even though I was 20 minutes away. I let my dad handle the cable bill mess he'd usually dump on me. And when my mom called asking if I could help pay for new patio furniture before some spring sale ended, I told her no. Just no. No excuse. Just the word. There was silence on her end. A long one. Then, okay. It was the first time I'd ever heard my mother not argue back about money. The first few weeks were the hardest. Not because I missed giving them money, but because I missed the version of them that showed up when they needed something. That sounds messed up when I say it out loud, but it's the truth. When my mom needed help, she was warm. She called me sweetheart. She told me I was the backbone of this family. When the crisis passed, I went back to being furniture. So, when I stopped being the guy who fixed everything, I also stopped getting the only version of affection I'd ever consistently received from them. I started spending more time alone. Not in a sad way, just in a recalibrating way. I'd go to work, come home, cook dinner, watch whatever game was on, and go to bed. Weekends, I'd hit the gym or drive out to the reservoir and just sit in my truck for a while with the windows down. I wasn't moping. I was decompressing. Years of being everyone's emergency contact will do that to a person. You don't realize how heavy the weight is until you finally put it down. And once I put it down, I realized I had no idea who I was without it. My entire identity in that family had been built around being useful. Take that away, and what's left? Just Garrett. And I had to figure out if just Garrett was enough. Turns out he was. But it took a while to believe that. It wasn't a clean break. At first, they just got colder. Fewer texts, less warmth, fewer photos in the family group chat. Paige blocked me for a while, which stung more than I expected. But then something shifted. My dad called one Tuesday night just to ask how my day went. Not to request help, not to slide a favor into the conversation, just to talk. We ended up on the phone for 40 minutes about nothing important, and it was the best conversation I'd had with him in years. My mom texted me a photo of a pie she baked and said she used the recipe I'd sent her the year before. Said it actually turned out decent this time. Small things, but they were real things. And after months of nothing being real, that mattered more than I can explain. They didn't say thank you for the things I'd done. Not yet. But they started treating me less like a safety net and more like a person they genuinely wanted around. And after months of being treated like a vending machine with feelings, that shift felt like drinking cold water on the hottest day of the year. Small, but it hit different. What I was not expecting was who tried to undo all of it. Uncle Dean. He couldn't stand watching the dynamic shift. And I didn't know it yet, but he was just getting started. Uncle Dean had never been involved in anything meaningful. He was the guy who showed up late to every family event, insisted on giving some long toast nobody asked for, then vanished before cleanup without having brought a single dish. He floated around family drama like it bored him. But apparently my decision to stop being the family bank was now something he felt personally invested in. The first hint came during Easter. I hadn't planned on going. It was still too raw after the side door incident, and I was fully prepared to spend the day alone eating takeout and watching basketball. But Jared called and asked me to come. Said things had cooled down and Paige wanted to talk. I didn't fully trust that, but I went. I thought maybe there was a chance they were ready to stop making me the villain in a story where I'd only ever been the one writing checks. Turns out most of them were, but Uncle Dean was not. He kept dropping money jokes all afternoon like little grenades disguised as humor. Called me our little Rockefeller when I walked past him. Then, Garrett, the sponsor, when I sat down to eat. Someone mentioned wanting to plan a trip to Florida that summer, and he said loud enough for the entire room, better get Garrett to book it. That's the tradition, right? I didn't respond. Didn't even look at him. My dad actually handled it before I had to. Quiet but clear. Knock it off, Dean. That was new. That had never happened before. Uncle Dean just smirked like he hadn't heard it and helped himself to more food like nothing happened. Later that afternoon, I went into the kitchen for water and heard my name the second I pushed the door open. Uncle Dean was in there talking to my mom, telling her I was manipulating them, that I was holding money hostage to control the family, that my silence was a weapon, and my generosity had always been about power, not love. He was saying all of this with the kind of conviction that told me he'd been rehearsing these lines for weeks. I stood there for a second in the doorway, then walked straight in. My mom looked startled, but didn't speak. Uncle Dean didn't even pause. He turned directly to me and said, "You think because you paid a few bills, you're better than this family?" I didn't answer him. I looked at my mom. She said nothing. So, I walked back out. That night, Jared told me he thought it was jealousy. Uncle Dean had been living with his girlfriend in the same rented house since the early 2000s. No kids, no real career. He bounced from gig to gig, always had stories about the stock market or some venture that never materialized. He was the kind of guy who talked about potential like it was a retirement plan. Maybe he needed to feel important, too. But his version of importance required someone else to feel small. At the time, I just thought it was pure jealousy. But looking back, what Dean was doing wasn't just some petty annoyance. This was a full-blown campaign. He was actively poisoning the well every single time I left the room. And it's a pattern I've seen play out before. The person who contributes the least always has the loudest opinion about the person who contributes the most. Dean had no job, no real career, no accomplishments, but he had opinions about my money. Seriously? And honestly, I'm glad I didn't waste energy arguing with him. The smart move was to put the real question back on my parents. Over the next month, Uncle Dean kept digging in. My mom stopped calling again. My dad's texts got shorter. I felt the shift. Subtle, like someone turned the thermostat down a few degrees. But I knew exactly who had his hand on the dial. This time I didn't absorb it. I called my parents and asked to talk, just the three of us. They invited me for dinner. My mom made lasagna and spent 20 minutes talking about the weather. Finally, I put my fork down. Uncle Dean has been saying things to you, and I know you've been listening, but you need to ask yourselves why someone who can't manage his own life is so invested in controlling mine. My dad said, "We know. He's been in our ear for a long time." I told them it was time to stop letting that happen. That dinner changed something. For the first time, my parents were looking at the situation instead of just reacting to whoever talked to them last. But Uncle Dean wasn't finished. The next time I saw him, it wasn't going to be snide comments. It was going to be a full attempt to burn the whole thing down. It was Paige's baby shower. Her first kid. Held at a small event venue outside town with string lights and fake rustic charm that looked way better in photos than in real life. My mom sent me the invitation by mail, a pastel green envelope with my name in cursive. I stared at it for 3 days. Paige and I hadn't had a real conversation in months. The last time we actually talked, it was a 5-minute phone call that felt more like checking a box than connecting as siblings. But I went. I figured the worst that could happen was an awkward afternoon. I'd survived worse. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. Just enough time for the room to settle and the spotlight to land somewhere else. I didn't want the whole "he's here" moment. I just wanted to exist in the room without being the main event. Slipped in, hugged Paige, complimented her dress, handed over a gift card tucked inside a designer onesie, and took a seat near the edge of the main table. Jared and his girlfriend were already there. My mom was glowing like she'd been planning this moment her whole life. And then I spotted Uncle Dean, camped out by the refreshments table like he owned the venue. Already multiple plates deep, napkin tucked into his collar, laughing too loudly at jokes nobody else found funny. The kind of laugh designed to make sure everyone in the room knows you're there. At first, everything went fine. The games were standard. The food was decent. Paige looked genuinely happy. For a moment, I actually relaxed. Then Uncle Dean stood up. No warning. Just rose from his chair with his cup raised and announced, "Before we get to the gifts, I want to say something about family." My stomach dropped through the floor. I knew that tone. He started slow. Talked about how family means showing up. How real love isn't about financial transactions. How some people think handing out money makes them saints, but really it just makes them loud. My face went cold. He never said my name. He didn't have to. Every word was aimed directly at my chest, and every person in that room knew it. Paige stared at the table. My mom fidgeted with a napkin. My dad sat completely still, jaw tight, like he was physically stopping himself from saying something. He finished by saying, if we want to raise the next generation right, we need to remember what real connection looks like. Not guilt, not leverage, just family. Then he sat down like he delivered a Nobel Prize acceptance speech. Nobody clapped. The room went stiff. Jared muttered something under his breath. I stood up, looked at nobody but Uncle Dean. The only person using guilt in this room is you. You don't get to stand up and rewrite the story just because you feel threatened. I gave because I wanted to. I helped because nobody else would. But you? You show up when it's convenient and act like you've earned a voice. I turned to my parents. He's been trying to wedge himself into this family's decisions for years, and you've let him. But he doesn't add anything. He doesn't help. He doesn't support. He just talks. I paused. Nobody stopped me. I'm not going to keep defending myself for doing the right thing just because he couldn't. If you keep letting him steer this family, you'll lose more than you realize. I walked out, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel confused or guilty. I felt clear. Man, that moment at the baby shower? Honestly, it might be the most satisfying thing I've ever done. Standing up like that, calmly, taking Dean apart in front of everyone. I didn't yell, didn't flip a table, just laid out the facts with surgical precision. And the crazy thing? Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody defended Dean. Every single person in that room already knew the truth. They just needed someone to say it out loud. And I was that guy. That's what truly standing your ground looks like, you know? Not anger, not ego, just pure clarity. Back home, I turned my phone off. I didn't want apologies or explanations or the standard family damage control playbook where everyone pretends it wasn't that bad and suggests we all move forward. I was done moving forward without ever actually addressing what happened. I didn't want words this time. I wanted proof. Proof that somebody in that room actually understood what went down and was willing to do something about it. The next morning, my dad called. I almost didn't answer. I sat there watching his name flash on the screen for 3 rings before I picked up. He said, "Your mom and I talked last night for a long time. We told Dean to give us space. He's not welcome at family events for a while. We've let him say too much for too long, and that's on us." Then he paused, and I could hear him take a breath like the next part was harder to get out. "We see it now, Garrett, and we're sorry." That hit harder than anything Uncle Dean ever said. Not because the words were dramatic, but because they were simple and real. My dad isn't the kind of man who apologizes easily. He's from that generation where saying sorry feels like losing something. So for him to call me up and say those words without being forced to, without me dragging it out of him, that meant he actually sat with it overnight and decided on his own that it needed to be said. That mattered. Later that week, Paige texted, "Thanks for showing up." I know that wasn't easy. Then a second message. He always talked down to me too. I just never said anything. It wasn't closure, but it was something real starting to grow. Things changed after that. My mom called a few days later and we talked normally. No tension, no Uncle Dean commentary, just a regular conversation between a mother and her son, which sounds like the most basic thing in the world. But after months of silence, it felt like a small miracle. Then came a lunch invite, a Sunday dinner, a random ice cream run where my dad just called and said, "You busy? Your mom wants that place by the river." Simple, like it was nothing, but it was everything to me. My parents stopped asking me for things. They just started showing up, being present without an agenda attached to it. Then they invited me to a long weekend at Lake George, 2 cabins, no pressure to pay. I offered anyway. My mom said, "No, this one's on us." That sentence almost knocked me sideways. Then one evening, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Uncle Dean. "You think they've changed? You think this is real?" I hung up. Minutes later, he sent a screenshot. A group chat message from my mom saying I acted like they were all part of my personal charity project, time-stamped 2 weeks before the baby shower. I sat with that screenshot for 2 days. Didn't respond to Dean. Didn't confront my parents. Just saved it. Not out of spite. Just to remember that trust, once broken, needs to be rebuilt with more than good intentions. You can't just decide one day that the slate is clean. It doesn't work like that. Then Paige called. Uncle Dean had sent her the same screenshot. "We confronted Mom," she said. She admitted it. Said she was venting before things changed. "We told her if she wants this to work for real, she has to say it out loud." That's when it clicked. Uncle Dean wasn't warning me. He was sabotaging something he'd been excluded from. He wanted destruction because he couldn't handle being irrelevant. I drove to Lake George alone. For hours of highway, switching between cautious hope and quiet suspicion. I kept the radio off for most of the drive, just me and the road and my own thoughts bouncing around in my head. Part of me expected this whole trip to be another setup, another well-meaning attempt at bonding that would detonate the second someone said the wrong thing. But the other part of me, the stubborn part that kept dragging me back into this family no matter how many times I got burned, wanted to be wrong about that. The cabins were nicer than expected. Real wood construction, not that prefab stuff. A stone fire pit out back, surrounded by mismatched lawn chairs that had clearly been collected over the years. Hammocks between the trees, rocking gently in the breeze. The whole place smelled like pine and campfire smoke, and something about it immediately lowered my shoulders about 2 inches. Paige waved when I pulled in, swollen ankles propped on a cooler, a plate of grapes balanced on her belly like a built-in shelf. "You made it," she said. Not sarcastic, not loaded, just warm, like it actually mattered to her that I was there. That first day felt normal in a way I hadn't experienced in years. My dad took over the grill with unnecessary flair. My mom kept giving him unsolicited advice on temperatures that he pretended not to hear. Jared showed up and started a 45-minute debate about whether hot dogs count as sandwiches. He also roasted me for my inability to start a campfire without YouTube. For a while, nobody brought up money or Uncle Dean. It just felt like family, the real kind. That night, my mom asked to talk. We sat by the water, while everyone inside pretended not to listen. She admitted she'd resented me for a long time, and instead of dealing with it, she'd made me the problem. Said it was easier to talk about me than to talk to me. Then she handed me a folded note she'd written in case she couldn't say it right out loud. I didn't read it yet. We just sat there quiet, listening to the water and the bugs. It was the most peaceful I'd felt around her in years. Later, we all crammed onto one couch for a movie. Then my phone buzzed. A group message from Uncle Dean. A photo of me and my mom sitting by the water, taken from behind the trees. He'd been out there watching. Let that sink in for a second. This man was literally hiding in the trees, taking photos of me and my mom. At a private family trip he wasn't even invited to. That's not jealousy anymore, is it? That's obsession. That's a grown man who'd lost his influence over the family and completely spiraled. And, honestly, in a messed up way, it was the best thing that could have happened. My dad went outside immediately. Everyone followed. Paige opened the family group chat, posted the photo Uncle Dean had sent, and typed, "This is what obsession looks like. We're done. Done letting you poison everything." Nobody defended Dean. My mom picked up her phone and removed him from the chat. No speech, no debate, just gone. That night, I read my mom's note. It wasn't perfect. Her handwriting was shaky in spots, but it was honest. She wrote about how she never learned to accept help without feeling small, and how my generosity became a mirror she didn't want to look into. She said she was sorry for punishing me for being the person she wished she could be. It wasn't wrapped in a bow, but for the first time in my life, it felt like my mom actually saw me. 6 weeks later, I got an email invite to a family reunion. Simple, casual. A note at the bottom that said, "Bring yourself." That's enough. I stared at it for about a day, going back and forth. Part of me still had that old reflex, the one that said I should bring something, contribute something, prove my value by showing up with my arms full. But I caught myself. That instinct was the whole problem. So I said yes. And I showed up with nothing. No gifts, no food platters, no envelopes with checks tucked inside. Just me, just Garrett, showing up as a person instead of a service. The pavilion was chaos in the best way. Kids running everywhere like someone had given them all sugar and set them loose. Bad karaoke in one corner. My cousin attempting a country song so far off key it was almost impressive. Overcooked ziti on a folding table bowing under the weight of aluminum trays. Somebody had strung up a banner that just said family in block letters, which was cheesy but somehow felt right. My mom spotted me the second I walked in and handed me a plate. Try the eggplant. Your aunt brought it, and it's actually good this year. No commentary about money, no loaded subtext, no hidden agenda, just a mom telling her son to eat. And that simplicity almost broke me in the best way. My dad stood up after everyone had eaten and the noise had died down. He didn't make a big production of it. Just cleared his throat and waited for people to notice. This year has been hard, harder than most. But sometimes you don't fix what you refuse to face. And this family's been refusing to face some things for a long time. He raised his plastic cup of lemonade to doing better. And to the people who kept showing up anyway, even when we gave them every reason not to. He looked at me when he said that last part. Didn't wink. Didn't make it a moment. Just a glance. But I felt it. Nobody mentioned Uncle Dean. Nobody needed to. His absence said everything his presence never could. Later, Paige sat beside me on the bench near the edge of the pavilion. Her baby was asleep on her shoulder. This tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket, making those little newborn noises that sound like a kitten trying to figure out how lungs work. She didn't say anything for a minute. Just sat there with me watching the rest of the family mill around. Then she said, "This is the first reunion I've actually enjoyed. Like, genuinely enjoyed, not just survived." I looked around. No tension. No side conversations designed to cut someone down when they weren't looking. No one performing. No one calculating what they could get out of being there. Just family, imperfect, loud, messy, still figuring it out, but real and present and trying. That day didn't fix everything. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it did. There are still moments when old habits try to creep back in. My mom will occasionally say something that carries a little more edge than it needs to, and I'll feel that old familiar tightness in my chest. Paige still doesn't call as often as I'd like. And there are silences in conversations with my dad that last a beat too long, like we're both thinking about the same things, but neither one of us wants to be the first to bring it up. It's not perfect. It's probably never going to be perfect. But something fundamental shifted underneath all of it. The foundation changed. The rules changed. And that matters more than perfection ever could. I used to think I had to buy my way into love. That generosity was the price of admission to my own family, and that if I ever stopped paying, I'd lose my seat at the table. I spent years operating under that belief, writing checks and solving problems and bailing people out all because I thought that was the only version of me they'd ever want around. But that was never love. That was a transaction dressed up as family. And no amount of money can buy you a place somewhere you already belong. I just show up now. And the people who matter show up too. So, what do you think? Have you ever had a moment where you realized your family dynamic was completely different from what you thought? Or maybe you've had to draw a really tough boundary with someone close to you. I'd really love to hear your stories in the comments below.